Our work is the first to look at how humans impact ecosystems in a really fine-grained way. I'm Stephanie Crabtree. I'm an archaeologist and archaeoecologist. So the Archaeoecology Project is a project that brings together archaeologists, ecologists, and anthropologists and computer modelers to try to understand the ways in which humans impact ecosystems and the ways ecosystems impact humans.
My name's Jennifer Dunn. I'm an ecologist and a complex systems scientist, and I study ecological networks. An ecological network is a representation of an ecosystem, and one type of ecological network is a food web. Most food webs that have been compiled and studied have been put together without including humans. One of the things that we've started to do is to use an ecological network framework to pull humans explicitly into ecological analyses.
And what's useful about networks is that sometimes it's difficult to understand what kind of effects it would have to remove this plant. Let's say it went extinct. Would that have ripple effects throughout the whole network? As the other animals scramble to eat something else, would that create pressures that we couldn't predict unless we had this networked approach? The other interesting thing is people don't just eat like a lot of animals do. We build shelters, we make clothing, we use things that we take from the environment in important rituals. And so in the Archaeoecology Project, we're not just looking at food consumption, we're looking at these myriad ways in which we impact environments.
What we're driving at is really trying to use food webs and ecological networks to approach issues of sustainability of socio-ecological networks in a new kind of way.
Within our team, we've published 2 of the first highly resolved food webs that include humans. Jennifer Dunn led a team that published a marine food web that included humans, and then I led a team that published the first highly resolved terrestrial food web. That's for the Ancestral Pueblo case study. We approached these in slightly different ways, but in the end, what we are getting is this ability to cross-compare the ways that people impact ecosystems in different ways worldwide. We're looking at multiple sites where there is incredibly good preservation, where we can really disentangle the human effect from the environmental effect, and where we can look at a really deep diachronic perspective. These 6 cases where we're working are the Ancestral Pueblo Southwest. We're working in the Norse Atlantic. We're working in the Pacific Northwest, where the indigenous peoples there developed a deep time coevolution with their ecosystem. We're working in French Polynesia, which is kind of similar to that Pacific Northwest, a very different environment, but that very deep coevolution of terrestrial and marine environments. In Europe, people were foragers and then they moved toward farming. And so we're looking at some of those earliest indications of that. And then we're also working in the Western Desert of Australia. We can look at these 6 cases, these 6 incredibly detailed cases, and look at the ways that people come into their environments, that they experiment with the environment and with the ecosystem, that they develop practices that are sustainable or sometimes non-sustainable. And we can take that and we can learn from it.
These systems that we're studying are very different in some ways. And as we start to understand the patterns in how humans interact with other species and use other species, we can understand those patterns, whether they're similar or different across systems. Are there generalities or are there specificities? And we can understand that in relation to the constraints that climate presents, or the opportunities that different kinds of ecological habitats present, or how cultural norms, for example, or social hierarchy affect how humans interact with other species. There's also aspects of the work that we're doing that will allow us to look at simple versus complex interactions. And that gives us a way to quantify technology use, innovation, and a variety of questions around that. So it provides a new lens not only on sustainability, but also on interesting issues in innovation and technology. Once we understand people's roles better, we can start to ask more questions about the sustainability of systems that include humans in terms of how they compare to other predators and how they interact with all the species they feed on and all the species that those feed on as well.